All right. So the monopolization of America, 400,000 views by Robert Reich. Let's check it out. A lot of people like this guy too. He's a well-respected intellectual on the left.
Not long ago, I visited some farmers in Missouri whose profits are disappearing. Why?
Their profits are disappearing in Missouri. Well, this was 2018. I think this was the same year. Missouri Mussolini Josh Hawley got elected to the Senate, who is a nationalist knucklehead. Josh Hawley. So maybe, so it looks like Missouri, they, even when it comes to Republicans, they are choosing central planning. They are embracing the economics of Robert Reich.
Monsanto alone owns the key
Monsanto, oh no!
to more than 90% of the soybeans planted by farmers in the United States and 80% of the corn, which means Monsanto can charge farmers much higher prices. And farmers are getting squeezed from the other side, too, because the food processors they sell their products to are also consolidating into mega companies that have so much market power they can cut the prices they pay to farmers. This doesn't mean lower food prices to you. It means more profits to the monopolists.
Oh no, not profits, you guys.
America used to have antitrust laws.
We used to have antitrust laws. We used to. I guess they don't exist anymore. Of course, what was it? Google antitrust. Google just is about to get hit up for antitrust. Google is reportedly facing new antitrust probe. I mean, Microsoft got hit up for it back in the 90s. Oh, it's in California. Apparently, these laws are non-existent.
Corporations from monopolizing markets.
Thank you, Radical Liberty. Laughing at my Missouri Mussolini joke. I've been using it for weeks now, trying to get it to stick, and no one likes it. I get no respect.
And often broke up the biggest culprits. No longer. It's a hidden...
Broke up the biggest culprits. Standard Oil. I believe so Standard Oil at the peak of its powers had, I think, like 91% of the oil industry, which was, at the time, smaller than the shoe industry. I've talked about this before, but by the time they got slapped with antitrust, by the time they went to court, I think they lost a significant amount of their market share to new companies like Texaco and Gulf Oil, and they were continuing to decline in market share. But also, they had competition from overseas. Before the advent of the automobile, which in 1915 it was just getting started, most oil was refined into kerosene for lighting. So Standard Oil did have competition, not from their own industry, but from electricity and the light bulb, Thomas Edison. So they still had competition. Sometimes you get competition from places outside of your industry.
Redistribution of money and power from the majority of Americans to corporate executives and wealthy shareholders.
Oh, that's what's going on? Monopolies everywhere. They're all over the place.
I'm in a supermarket. Looks like lots of choice, doesn't it? But let's take a closer look.
Monopolies.
The four largest food companies control 82% of beef packing.
Hold on.
85%. Four largest food companies control...
Four largest food companies control...
82%.
80%. I guess that's a monopoly, you guys. Four different companies, not even controlling the entire industry. Those are monopolies.
Beef packing. 85% of soybean processing, 63% of pork packing, and 53% of chicken processing.
So four companies control about half of chicken processing, and they're all monopolies, apparently.
All these products and brands from just 10 huge corporations.
Oh, 10. Okay.
Look at all these brands of toothpaste. 70% of toothpaste sales go to just two companies.
70%. Two companies control 70% of the toothpaste industry, folks. Doesn't mention, you probably can compete with them on some level. Although it's hard to tell, especially with, healthcare-related products. Does it get the stamp of the FDA, which I've talked about before? Usually these regulatory agencies do create real monopolies by regulating competition out of the marketplace through bad intellectual property protection policy. through other regulations. So monopolies do exist, but it's always because of government favors, which Robert Reich probably loves. He probably loves the FDA. Probably washes every time Robert Reich comes across a government bureaucrat from any agency, probably gets down on his knees and washes their feet.
Lots of sunglasses. Actually, one company, Luxottica. They also own nearly all the eyeglass retail outlets.
Oh no, not sunglasses. Of course, I don't have my sunglasses here. My pair of sunglasses, I don't know who made it, but I got it. It's sponsored by Jones Soda, and somehow they ended up in my possession years ago, and they're durable, and I wear them a lot. So thank you, Jones Soda, for providing me with free sunglasses.
Practically every plastic hanger in America is now made by one company, Minetti.
Oh no, coat hangers.
What brand of cat food shall I buy?
Like, when's the last time you struggled to buy coat hangers? Let's go to Amazon right now. Oh, wait a minute. Amazon's a big monopoly. I forgot. Let's see. Coat hangers. Get some nice coat hangers for what? $25? You can get a pack of 50 coat hangers for $23. Is that breaking your bank, folks? $23 for 50 coat hangers. You'll probably not have to buy coat hangers for years. I think usually when I get coat hangers, they're usually like at a dollar store, like Family Dollar or Walmart. Usually get them for cheap. So like monopolies, they make everything worse and more expensive apparently. Then he uses an example like coat hangers. The arrogant bro says, "Oh no, my wallet." Uh-oh, cat food.
There are basically just two companies.
Two companies, 75%. So a quarter of the market is not controlled by two companies. Therefore, monopolies.
The problem with all this consolidation into a handful of giant firms is they don't have to compete.
Now notice the pivot. You notice how they always pivot. Like they'll start off with big, scary monopolies. Oh no, they'll dominate the competition. This is the myth of the monopoly. If we just let free markets run amok without brilliant legislation like Sherman Antitrust and Clayton Antitrust, then they'll eventually evolve into these big behemoth monopolies that control the market, and once they have no competition, they're gonna squeeze the customers, they're gonna jack up prices, they're probably gonna screw their workers too. And so he starts with monopolies, this weasel scare word, monopoly. And now he's just saying giant firms. And you notice this happens a lot with people who, with the anti-capitalists and people like Robert Reich. They blur the lines. They start with big, scary monopoly, and then they talk about giant firms like they're big, scary monopolies. Oh yeah, as Chandler says, I get free coat hangers every time I get my clothes dry cleaned. Yeah, same here. I forgot about that. I have to throw them away. The coat hangers are so expensive that small business dry cleaners are going bankrupt by giving them away.
Which means they can jack up your prices.
Oh, there we go. Jack up your prices. Giant firms. What did I tell you? Of course, now we're going into the pharmaceuticals again, which is heavily regulated and does have an issue with monopolies, thanks to our beloved bureaucrats at places like the FDA.
Drug companies, in effect, pay the makers of generic drugs to delay cheaper versions. Such pay-for-delay agreements are illegal in other advanced economies, but antitrust enforcement hasn't laid a finger on them in America. They cost you and me an estimated $3...
And another thing that happens is something called Evergreening, where a company will have a patent that, and I think the patents in the pharmaceutical industry only last 10 years, and once they already have the patent greenlit, it's very easy for them to slightly change it. So a lot of these pharmaceutical companies, they'll slightly alter the drug a little bit when it's coming up on 10 years. And then they'll apply for a new patent. And then they'll say, oh, the pharmaceutical companies will tell the doctors and the care providers in the hospitals, oh, this is our new drug. It's new and improved. You don't want to use that garbage version we've been using for the last 10 years. And so then doctors will switch to the new version of the drug that they continually have a monopoly on. And generic drug makers, because now the patent's about to expire, They don't even bother making generic versions because no doctor will prescribe it, because who wants to prescribe outdated medicine?
$1.5 billion a year.
Whoa.
You think your health insurance will cover this? Well, health insurers are consolidating too.
Yeah, health insurance, another heavily regulated industry, and it got corrupt. I talk about this a lot, but yeah, it started in the 40s and 50s with price controls on labor because of World War II, and then the tax code made benefits like health insurance exempt, so then big employers and big insurance got in bed with each other because of this this market distortion, this somewhat fascist policy. And then it created distortion to the point where people would lose their insurance if they lost their job or they retired or whatnot. So that's what happens. And, government Obamacare further regulated the health insurance industries.
Which is one reason your health insurance premiums, co-payments, and deductibles are soaring. Massive consolidation into a handful.
And then I think a lot of insurance companies are not allowed to sell across state lines. I'm not really astute on that topic, though, but I hear it a lot. Something I should probably look into before speaking about.
Of giant businesses is going on all over.
Flywheel Shyster says, that definitely happened with the SSRI antidepressant industry. What, evergreening?
You think you have lots of options?
So Flywheel Shyster confirms, yes. I guess that happened to SSRIs, antidepressants, evergreening. Yeah, it's almost impossible. It's very costly to get new drugs approved by the FDA. And then if you only have 10 years, I mean, why not try to keep kicking that can down the road as much as you can? This is what happens when you turn whatever is left of the free market economy into pressure group warfare. Got to get in bed with the regulators.
For booking discount airline
Got to play by their bullshit rules.
Tickets and hotels online. Actually, you have only two.
And that's what consumer protection looks like, by the way, folks. The FDA, you see, whenever you criticize the beloved FDA, you get told that they are a consumer protection agency. Without the FDA, big corporations, they would just sell you a pill that they say cures your headache when it really makes your dick fall off. We can't trust big greedy corporations, to be honest. So then we get regulators like the FDA, and then they create monopolies, which ends up jacking up drug costs, the cost of drugs, the cost of medication, locks competition out of the marketplace, stalls innovation, and this is what's called consumer protection.
Expedia merged with Orbitz, so that's one company. And then there's Priceline. How about your cable and internet service?
That was an industry that lasted, what, 10 minutes? The travel advisor industry?
Merged with Orbitz, so that's one company. And then there's Priceline.
I think all those companies are like less than 20 years old, right?
How about your cable and internet service? Basically, 4 companies.
Now, this is another issue where there's some legitimacy to monopolies, because a lot of cities, a lot of regions will lock out competition when it comes to cable and internet service. This is what I remember whenever I got into debates about net neutrality. That was an issue we had to address, because the net neutrality knuckleheads have some legitimacy. They say, what if you live in an area where there's one internet service provider, and then they suddenly decide one day, oh, we're going to throttle your Netflix. You can't say there's free market competition when the city is locking out competition amongst ISPs. And my answer to that is open up the market in that region and let competition flourish. But even then, if no competition comes, if you say you had one Starbucks in a 50-mile radius because it's a rural country, you would say, oh, that Starbucks has a monopoly on making coffee for this 50-mile radius. Therefore, we get to regulate Starbucks and decide what and get to pick what's on their menu. We need to make sure they have enough decaf options, enough vegan options for the people, the vegans that live in this 50-mile radius rural area. And it's like, no. If vegans want vegan coffee and it's not at their Starbucks, then they need to make a new coffee place.
This is
Flywheel Shyster says there's real bad lack of competition in Georgia. It's from city bureaucrats, though. Yeah, exactly.
unfortunate to say the least. And not just because industries and services with little competition charge you more. It's also troubling because such consolidation keeps down wages. Workers with less choice of who to work for have a harder time getting a raise. When local labor markets are dominated by one major big box retailer or one grocery chain, for example, those firms essentially set wage rates for the area. These massive corporations...
So yeah, massive corporations, big monopolies, they also screw the worker because then there's no competition for labor.
also have a lot of political clout. That's one reason they're consolidating. Power. Antitrust laws were supposed to stop what's been going on, but today
they were supposed to stop it, you guys.
Almost a dead letter. That hurts you.
And antitrust hurts people for the sake of being successful. Oh, you consolidated big aspects of the market. You're this large, successful company. Well, we got to break you up because we can't have that going on. Not in America. The country that's supposed to be the land of the free, where you get to pursue your own happiness. Antitrust says no. We got to put a limit on that. Once you get to a certain point, by our arbitrary standards, because again, Standard Oil, which is the go-to example, they never had 100% control of the market. And even by the time they got to that case, they were losing control and influence over that market. Once you gain too much control by our arbitrary standards, then we get to break you up. We get to force you to sell parts of your company. We get to force you to have competition. Doesn't that sound wonderful, folks?
The first antitrust law came in 1890 when Senator John Sherman responded to public anger about the economic and political...
John Sherman, one of the worst, low-key one of the worst politicians. Him and Teddy Roosevelt, beloved Republicans, the pretenders of capitalism, I like to call them.
Power of the huge railroad, steel, telegraph, and oil cartels, then called trusts.
Oh, cartels, huh? That's what we call them, trusts? Trusts are the same as cartels, huh, Robert Reich? Discovering and refining oil, building Now, okay, so he uses railroads. That's interesting.
Huge railroads.
Railroads, the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific were government projects, government-funded projects, and heavily regulated. And they were a total disaster because of it. And when James J. Hill built the Union, or the Northern Pacific, which connected, I think, Minnesota with Seattle, it was completely privately owned, privately built, a lot more efficient, a lot more successful than the Union and Central Pacific, which were built in the name of national prosperity, national prestige, right? Got to connect the coasts for national prestige, and this will be great for the military. This will be great for the economy. And they were inefficient. And when Northern Pacific was crushing them, then we needed more regulation. Not specifically antitrust, but hey, it was unfair, you guys. But yeah, the railroads, particularly Central and Union Pacific, they weren't privatized. Can't blame that on a lack of antitrust.
Steel, telegraph, and oil cartels, then called trusts, that were essentially running America. A handful of corporate chieftains, known as robber barons.
Robber barons. Oh no, you guys. A lot of these guys are real heroes too. Like Andrew Carnegie came to America with nothing. He was he was getting paid the equivalent of $35 in today's money for working full-time at a train station reading Morse code when he was like 11 years old. And then he became one of the richest people in history by building the first steel bridge in America, I believe, if I recall correctly. Rockefeller, same thing. These are some real heroes. And Robert Reich, being the goon that he is, thinks of these guys as cartels, robber barons. Of course, I think robber baron comes from the concept of someone that would, block off a part of a road or a highway and rob you to get by, kind of like from, what is it, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And the irony is these guys made it easier to move. Cornelius Vanderbilt, he started with shipping, eventually moved into trains. Andrew Carnegie, he built the steel that would build some of the railroads. John D. Rockefeller, he discovered the oil that would power the automobile. These guys made it easier for you to move around America. And the audacity for Robert Reich to compare them to robber barons. If anyone's a robber baron, it's Robert Reich.
Presided over all this, collecting great riches at the expense of workers who toiled.
Oh no, they got rich, you guys.
Long hours, often in dangerous conditions, for little pay. Corporations gouged consumers and corrupted politics.
Of course, so a lot of people go to the Gilded Age. Oh no, the steel mills, they were terrible working conditions. And they were, in compared to a lot of work today. The working conditions in the factories were actually a huge step up above agrarian work. Because before the Industrial Revolution, before all these horrible jobs, most Americans had to work on farms, work long hours on the farm, including in harsh weather conditions. Even George Washington himself, the first president in American history, in retirement, he died because he had to work on his farm in freezing rain and snow, and he contracted pneumonia. So even, the best of the best, the bourgeoisie of the bourgeoisie, so to speak, in early America, George Washington, he could not avoid working in harsh conditions on a farm. The Industrial Revolution, all of the horrible sweatshop jobs that you read about now in your history textbooks, they were a huge improvement. Let's go to Gilded Age. Even I know Wikipedia is not always reliable, but I've read about this in Free Market Revolution, a lot of other books, but it even says it on Wikipedia. Here we go. The rapid expansion of industrialization led to real wage growth of 60% between 1860 and 1890, spread across the ever-increasing labor force. Real wages, adjusting for inflation, rose steadily. This contradicts what Robert Reich is saying. The exact percentage increased depending on dates and the specific workforce. The Census Bureau reported in 1892 that the average annual wage per industrial worker, including men, women, and children, rose from $380 in 1890 to $564 in 1890. A gain of 48% over 10 years. And what's Robert Reich saying? Let's go back.
For all this, collecting great riches at the expense of workers who toiled long hours, often in dangerous conditions, for little pay.
For little pay.
Corporations.
Back in the early 1800s, USA was essentially China. Yeah, exactly. All countries have to go through that. It sucks. It's unfortunate, but every country, in order to get industrialized, you have to go through this transition. And it's an improvement. It's a steady improvement. Otherwise, you can have central planners like the Soviet Union who industrialized by starving millions of people because they made them work on farms and then they traded their food to industrialized countries in exchange for industry and technology.
Gouged consumers and corrupted politics. They had so much political power, they made it impossible to enforce the Sherman Antitrust Act.
Good!
In 1901, progressive reformer
Sherman Antitrust belongs in the shredder, Robert.
Teddy Roosevelt became president.
Another Republican hero, Teddy Roosevelt. The left has a huge boner for Teddy Roosevelt, at least until recently. Now they're trying to take down his statue. But until 2 weeks ago, the left, the central planners, the socialists on the left, like Robert Reich, they just cream all over their chest at the idea of Teddy Roosevelt breaking up the trusts.
It was demanding action. In his first message to Congress in December 1901, only 2 months after assuming the presidency, Roosevelt warned, there is...
Assuming the presidency that he didn't even get elected to the first time.
widespread conviction in the minds of the American people that the great corporations, known as the trusts, are in certain of their features and tendencies hurtful to the general welfare.
Oh no, they're hurtful to the general welfare.
Roosevelt used the Sherman Antitrust Act to go after the Northern Securities Company, a giant railroad trust run by J.P. Morgan, the nation's most powerful businessman.
Yeah, he was real powerful.
The U.S. Supreme Court...
He was. I know I kind of said that in a sarcastic tone, but no, J.P. Morgan, I view him as a hero. Much more heroic than Theodore Roosevelt. J.P. Morgan, he funded he funded the steel industry, he funded the railroads, he helped get electricity off the ground. And Robert Reich just demonizes him. What a piece of shit.
Backed him up and ordered the company dismantled. In 1911, John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Trust was broken up too.
See, Robert Reich is just loving this. Loving Teddy Roosevelt, this goon shaking down America's builders.
In its decision, the Supreme Court effectively altered the Sherman Act, saying that monopolistic restraint of trade was only objectionable if it was unreasonable. And that determination was to be made by the courts.
Yeah, the courts. They'll decide what's unreasonable or not.
So what was an unreasonable restraint of trade? In the presidential election of 1912, Roosevelt, running again for president, but this time as a third-party candidate, said he would...
More like third-party candidate.
...allow some concentration of industries where there were efficiencies due to large scale. And then he'd have experts regulate these large corporations for the public benefit. Woodrow Wilson, who ended up winning the election, and his advisor, Louis Brandeis, took a different view. They didn't think regulation would work and thought all monopolies should be broken up. For the next 65 years, both views dominated. We had strong antitrust enforcement, along with regulations that held big corporations in check. Most big mergers were prohibited. Even large size was thought to be a problem.
So again, this is another example. So he's talking about all this wonderful regulation that happened in the early 1900s. More proof that you can't blame the Great Depression on capitalism, folks. I think that's enough. That's all I'm gonna watch of Robert Reich. So full of shit.